everybody, and welcome again to JSCAI Conversations in Interventional Cardiology. It's my pleasure to be here with an incredible panel. My name is Sahil Parikh from Columbia University in New York, and I'm one of the associate editors of JSCAI. On behalf of our editor-in-chief, Alexandra Lansky, I want to welcome you to today's conversation. We're going to move our focus to pulmonary embolism today, and we're going to talk with an esteemed panel of experts about a recent paper in JSCAI entitled Novel Aspiration Thrombectomy and Blood Reinfusion System for Acute Intermediate Risk PE, the AVENTUSTrial. I'm joined today by an incredible group, Dr. Seher Sabri from the Division of Interventional Radiology at MedStar Georgetown, Doctors June Lee and Mehdi Shishabor from University Hospitals Cleveland Medical Center, and Dr. Peter Monteleone from Ascension Texas Cardiovascular Institute and UT Austin Dell Medical School. We are all old friends, and we're going to start by hearing about the results of the trial from Dr. Sabri.
Thank you for JSCAI for hosting this. So this is the presentation I'm going to have about the paper that was published last summer. So this is for the Aventus pivotal trial. I had the pleasure of working with Dr. June Lee as my co-PI. So the study design was a multi-center single-arm trial with follow-up for 48 hours and 30 days. We enrolled 120 patients in 22 sites with 49 unique users. If you look here at the subject distribution, many of the patients, the majority had elevated biomarkers, and almost all of them had bilateral clot distribution. And if you look at a modified BOVA score, which is one of the validated scores that's mentioned in the new guidelines, the overwhelming majority of the patient had, elevated BOVA score, and that includes biomarkers and elevated heart rate and, as some of the metrics. If you look at procedural characteristics, almost all the patient had their blood returned as part of the system. Estimated blood loss was less than 50 cc, and none of the patient required blood transfusion. And the important thing is the majority of the cases were done with a single pass through the heart without having to take the catheter out, and the catheter dwell time averaged less than 40 minutes. If you look at the pulmonary pressure reduction, it was significant for peak and mean pressures. Moving on to the primary outcome, there was the study met its primary endpoint, which is decrease in reduction of RV-LV ratio more than 27%. And if we look at the decrease in clot burden, there was a significant decrease in clot burden, and it was a 35.9% reduction, which is one of the highest for IDE trials, and that was done at the 48-hour scan. Again, the study met its primary endpoint for safety endpoint, and that is no device-related adverse events, and there were some non-related adverse events, less than 3%. If you're looking at a very important outcome, which was unique for IDE trials, was one of actually the first IDE trial that had a functional outcome in it. And if you look here, there's a 30-day quality of life score with significant reduction at 30 days. As well as looking at the 6-minute walk distance, there was a significant increase at the 30-day post-procedure by 132.9 meters. So this was a really significant, and it took a lot of effort to do and collect this data, and congratulate the investigators on completing this and adding to the body of literature on functional outcomes beyond just the 48 hours. In summary, the AVENTUS trial met its primary endpoint for efficacy and safety outcomes, and the clot was efficiently removed and was returned with no blood transfusions through 48 hours. And I think, to me, most importantly, the functional status and subjective quality of life findings signal that there is improvement post-thrombectomy. So these are the trials, and happy to discuss it with the group.
Great, Seher, thank you so much. So I think that all of these IDE studies are mandated by FDA to have a relatively similar clinical trial design. The features of the device, though, are helpful to understand. So, Seher, why don't you walk us through the catheter caliber, how is blood return handled, just some of the basics for people that are not familiar with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak some to it, and I would like June to speak to it more as well. So, I mean, it's the key features of it is it has a bevel tip, and that allows for suction efficiency in suction, and it does not attach to the wall and kind of limits the lollipopping. And that's one of the important aspects for efficiency in the case that you don't have to take the catheter out. The bevel tip also allows for efficiency in the getting into the upper lobe branches. And the suction power of it is excellent, and you can mostly park more centrally and not having to go deeper into the branches, which makes the procedure go faster. And the blood return system is very efficient. It's automated, so basically the clot that you have, you can retain it in a closed loop, so you don't have to take the blood out and syringes out. So it's really a much less messy procedure, so to speak. June, you can speak more about some of your experience with the design of the device as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sahir. The design of the catheter is actually very efficient in that avoiding the use of a dilator, being able to negotiate between different branches, either from the right upper to the right lower or to the left pulmonary artery, without having to do multiple wire and catheter exchanges, really makes the procedure much faster, actually, for those of us who were in the clinical trial. In addition, the direct inline blood filtration system allows us to really do everything just kind of on table without having to have multiple hands on deck to filter the blood and return the blood.
And so, Mehdi, you guys did a lot of the early preclinical development of this catheter. I know that you're very plugged into understanding the unmet needs in the space and some of the challenges with existing prior FDA-approved devices. What are the priorities still from your standpoint, and how does this new device address some of those priorities?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Sahil, for having me. And I want to once again congratulate Sahir and June for the amazing trial and, such results as he presented it. Um, it's, with any device, we always want to know, can you improve efficacy, right? Anytime you can improve the efficacy of something, that's obviously very appealing to us. But that's very hard. So if you cannot really significantly improve the efficacy compared to another device, then it becomes around efficiency and safety. And I think that's kind of the game, if you will, because efficacy sometimes gets to be very difficult in many of these devices. The improvements are very incremental in nature. And the idea, as June and Sahir nicely explained, is that having these incremental advantages of not having a dilator, not having to do too many exchanges, because we know when you have long catheters and you're doing exchanges, you can have perforations, you can have complications, wires come back, then you have to go re-engage. So again, trying to make it easier. The other aspect of it is that, they said the early adopters and then the late adopters and all that. And the reality is that we want to, and the guideline just came out, and I'm sure you're going to talk about it maybe. But the bottom line is that we want to get these technologies in the hands of many. Like it shouldn't be that there are some patients that are getting admitted to hospitals, some hospitals with intermediate to high risk PE and are not getting treated because they don't have these technologies or the operators are not comfortable. So can we make these devices more simple, ease of use, so that they could be available in every hospital, so that any patient going to any hospital can get treatment for PE if appropriate?
I appreciate that. So, Peter, you had a privilege of being not only a co-investigator and co-author, but a reputation for being an iconoclast in this space. Tell me a little bit about now that we have new guidelines, and we have multiple devices, at least half a dozen devices of the thrombectomy sort of vintage. How do you choose? And how does a new operator get familiar with this device and compare it to other predicate devices that are in the space?
That's a great question. And thank you, to this panel for including me and Jay Sky for putting this on. So all the points that were made by the team here are spot on. There's there's a large number of these new technologies that are coming through in the P treatment in general and in mechanical thrombectomy. And so when you start seeing some of these differentiators, with regards to the engineering of the device or the way the device works, it really makes you think about not just the clinical trial in front of you, but also the tool that you're choosing to accomplish a goal. I think the team here did a really good, excellent job. I mean, the engineering was talked about. It's a fairly elegant solution to a problem. You take a tube with an end hole, you cut that end hole in the bevel, and the end hole becomes bigger, and suddenly you can aspirate more. You have the ability to point that end hole at a side branch, and you see it for the first time on a bench, and you think, wow, that probably works. And then all of a sudden you have the device angled up over the pulmonary artery. You're able to turn the bevel up at the right upper, and you could aspirate clot that you'd previously be going after with a vertebral catheter or a JR4 and a wire, adding time on. And as Dr. Shishabor mentioned, efficiency is a big deal, safety is a big deal, and also just a kind of quick and easy understanding to how a technology might perform makes you want to get something like this in your hands. And credit to the team on the clinical trial, making sure that this is studied robustly and effectively, both from an efficacy and safety endpoint. Dr. Sabri mentioned, the modified Miller outcomes. That's an extremely important characteristic of a mechanical thrombectomy trial. We're talking about how much clot came out and the ability to say this kind of simple beveled edge that lets me point at side branches and pull clot out of smaller distal arteries without occluding them with, it matches up with what you saw on modified Miller being as high as 36%.
Yeah, I think also some of the functional outcomes that you talked about, Sahir. I mean, obviously it's not a randomized trial, but certainly to put in perspective, the kinds of improvements in 6-minute walk that you're seeing rival those seen in many of the important heart failure trials historically. So 136 meters doesn't sound like a lot, maybe, but it is a huge delta in this patient population. So it's good to see that these functional outcomes are now being embedded into these trials. Wanted to also just remind people of the size of the device. It is 16 French device, not 25 French or 24 French. Is that right?
It's a 24 French device, actually.
24 French. So this is the conversation that people have all the time. If you're thinking about the devices, they often bucket it into sort of big caliber, medium caliber, and small caliber. And so when we think about the big caliber devices, everybody's wondering about bleeding hazard. So maybe Sahara or June, you want to address what was the bleeding risk in this trial, and was there any ISTH major bleeding that you guys saw in the study?
So it's a large bore device goes into that category, and then there's no bleeding incidents in the device, not internally or at the access site. So that was a main thing. And yes, it's been discussed and reported, but not in this trial. We have not seen that. I think people are getting more comfortable with using large bore devices. And to your question earlier to Peter about choosing between devices, I think this is something that it's going to be a lot of factors. One of them is comfort with the device and its design. Comfort with using a large bore versus medium bore device, ease of use, how many people do you need on the table? Some of these things that, how cumbersome it is. Do you have, depending on your state, do you have several people scrubbed in with you, or is it by yourself with just one circulator or one tech, depending where you're at? So this device, because it's automated blood return, can help with that. There's no console that's needed. Some other, require capital equipment and such. So you have to kind of think of all these features when you choose a device. And of course, we got to look at the outcomes. I mean, all of the IDEs so far showed good RV, LV reduction. Miller score is kind of close to some of them. Some are higher than others. But then becomes all the efficiency and ease of use. So that's what's going to determine where people are going to go. Hopefully now the guidelines going to guide us which patients to choose. And we're getting into that direction. And now just deciding on the device. I think the large bore, I don't think is an issue. People are getting used to it, and we have not seen bleeding issues with it.
So, Mehdi, I'm going to give you the last word. This is a journey that you've been on for a number of years. You've seen all the predicate devices. You've helped develop this device and now seen it to fruition all the way to FDA approval. Where do you see the field going? What's your vision?
Well, what a journey, to be honest with you. And I want to throw a little thank you to Kenny Rosenfeld and the folks that started the whole concept of PERT, to be honest with you. We never talked about PE. And once in a while, we used to get a patient and we were in dire situation and, post-operatively, lysis was not the great option. And we tried to go with catheters and suck things out and do all kinds of things. And it never worked, to be honest with you. So what a journey, and what a fortune for myself to be part of all of this and see how we have evolved to the point that we started with no device, and now, as you said, there's at least half a dozen devices out there. Folks are pushing the envelope to become more effective and efficient and safer, and I think that obviously now there's a guideline. I mean, think about it. This is a big deal. I think, in my opinion, that we have a guideline. So this is a condition and a treatment that's here to stay. And I think the future is going to be bright, most importantly for our patients, because we're going to help, I hope and I believe wholeheartedly that we are going to save lives for the most high-risk patients and for the moderate to intermediate risk, let's say D and E stages. Hopefully, we are reducing some of the shortness of breath, some of the data that's coming out about post-PE syndrome and all that. And with more guidance around who to select to treat, hopefully we can be much more selective and personalized.
All right. Well, I appreciate that comment. I think it's a perfect way to close. I want to thank all of my panelists for being here, and I want to thank you guys for executing an excellent trial. Please read about it in JSCAI, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time on Conversations in Interventional Cardiology.